Each year in my Middle East class, I start with this comment. There are no experts on the Middle East. The region is too complex and too diverse for any one person to understand everything about it. But that's one of the reasons that it makes it fascinating to study. I'm about to introduce you, or I am introducing to you, Jane Ferguson from the class of 2004, who has made it her life mission to report on the Middle East. And now I'm going to introduce the person that is as close to an expert as anyone that I know, Jane Ferguson.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm kind of surprised at how nervous I am. I'm not usually speaking in front of a live audience of hundreds of faces. For a living, I talk into a small round piece of glass that's usually being held up by a buddy of mine, and the two of us are just somewhere interesting talking, so I don't usually think about all the people watching. So this is new to me, so forgive me if I'm a little bit nervous. It's also just such an honor to be standing here in front of the students and faculty of the school. And since I arrived at Lawrenceville last night, I haven't been back here since my graduation day, unfortunately. I come and go from New York City for meetings and work things in Washington, D.C., and I've not come to school. And I have been flooded with nostalgia, and just, I'm so excited to be back in the village. I see TJ's is still there, serving pizza, and there used to be an old ice cream parlor that closed down, but there are a few things that I still recognize. And I was attending my local high school in Armagh, County Armagh, in Northern Ireland. The same school that my siblings went to, the same school that my father went to, way back in 2003. Just about 10 miles down the road from the farm that I grew up in and that I still lived on in Ireland. When someone from a school in the United States had come by and spoken with some of my teachers and put forward and asked them and said, could you put forward and recommend any of your students for a scholarship? Anybody that might be interested might have that kind of personality that they'd want to travel abroad to study. One of my politics teacher actually asked me to come and speak with a woman who was running this scholarship and would be interested in seeing me. Months later, I arrived here, excited, grateful, and hoping that no one would notice my enormous culture shock. I'd never been to the United States before. I was one of the Irish scholars sent over from Northern Ireland every year here. This year, I think it is Patrick and Angus, and maybe they're in the room. Obviously, they're really popular already, so that's nice. I glanced at the website last night in my hotel room. I was looking to see what teachers might still be here. It showed me that a lot of them have moved on since I was here nearly 15 years ago. So I was quite sad to not be able to say hi to a number of them. In particular, Mr. Freitas, who had been one of the housemasters for me. I was in McPherson House. And he, unfortunately, I see left earlier this year. He drove me for several hours through a massive snowstorm to make it to my flight home for Oxford University interviews. Really would never forget that. Some of my old teachers are still here, though, a couple. Ms. Stewart, who was also a housemaster at McPherson and a wonderful source of support and inspiration for me. Journalism class. This is so much easier when you clap. That makes this much easier for me. That was obviously a really good fit for me, and I loved that class. I was also in Mr. Williams's English classes. I remember being really intimidated because they were very difficult. They were tough, but they were really good. So I looked around when I got here at the confidence of my fellow students. And these kids, they seemed so cosmopolitan and so traveled and so smart, so clever. The girls seemed so well groomed and sophisticated. I remember taking the bus to Princeton to get our nails done and eat Thai food, and I had never done either before in my life. I spent much of my time initially here trying to pretend that it was all so normal for me. I remember being intimidated a lot in the first days here in Lawrenceville. It was partly that natural feeling I think all scholarship students get at some stage when they wonder if they really belong somewhere and if they can possibly try to blend in. I was astonished at how tough and hard-working everyone was. The schedule here was grueling. Classes starting at 7:30, I literally called home to tell people about that. I couldn't believe it. I actually couldn't believe also that when you played field hockey, you practiced every day. That was tough, but worth it. So students here, yes, still do, have such high standards, and mine were gonna have to step up too if I was gonna survive here, as I learned to keep up and grab every opportunity that it could to take part. I found the experience built a confidence in me that has stayed with me ever since. That has been a quiet tool in my life and in my career. The truth is that a lot of what I learned here at Lawrenceville has been of enormous value to me throughout some of my toughest and most challenging times in my career path. Now, I'm not under any delusion that any of you watch PBS News, or that many of you watch any kind of regular news on the TV these days. Perhaps I'm wrong, I hope I am. But perhaps you catch your broadcast news online, and you read the newspapers online too, and follow events abroad. I am a TV news foreign correspondent for PBS's evening news show, the NewsHour, and I occasionally write for the New Yorker magazine. In the past, I've worked for CNN and Al Jazeera English. I have lived in the Middle East for 10 years, reporting for various outlets, a lot of the time in conflict zones, as we might call them. It's a line of work I've always wanted to do. I dreamed of a life of adventure when I sat in this hall and studied in these classrooms. I had consumed the autobiographies and biographies of famous international journalists, explorers, and writers. I couldn't imagine anything more fantastic, more thrilling than watching history happen in front of my eyes, traveling all over the world at half an hour's notice, and making corrupt abusers of power extremely nervous. I was most excited by the possibility of making a difference, of helping people around the world understand one another, understand our connection to everyone else in this world a little better, to add a little more compassion into the world, to communicate, to commune, reminding people that we're all a lot more similar than you would think. And these wonderful experiences have happened for me, and I've been blessed with an enormous gift in life of being able to do for a living the one thing I really think I was put on this earth to do, the one job I think I'm best suited for. And that's worth everything, and I'm enormously grateful. But getting from Lawrenceville and into the career I had dreamed of was harder than anything I could have imagined. As the saying goes, you don't know what you don't know. And back then, I hadn't the faintest idea of how tough and competitive the professional road would be. And thank God I didn't know, because I probably would have given up before I'd even begun. There were a lot of important skills and values I had learned even from just 1 year here at Lawrenceville that gave me an edge and that helped me through. Confidence in myself was by far the biggest. Where I grew up in Northern Ireland, our cultural values very much humility, and our ethics often involves making sure we don't place our own personal egos over our place in the community around us. It's one of our greatest assets, to be fair, to be down to earth, as we would call it. Sometimes, however, it can make us the last to push forward, to ask for what we want, and to take a chance at being wrong. Raise our hand to answer a question if we aren't 100% sure. My fellow students at Lawrenceville seemed so ready to try things they had no experience with, to get things wrong and get back up, to raise their hands and argue their point of view around the Harkness table. That quiet confidence has been something I have had to call upon again and again in my work. when I've pushed my managers for tougher assignments, volunteered for some of the more dangerous work, reached out for more in my career, and pitched stories to my editors I really wasn't sure I could get. It has been there in the terrifying few seconds before I go live on air, when the voice in my earpiece says, "Coming to you now, Jane." My stomach free falls and I hold a notebook between my fingers so no one notices my trembling hands. That's when that added confidence in the face of self-doubt wins. And there is just enough to push me forward. Much of that started here. Grit is something I have needed by the bucket load, and I got a master's degree in it at Lawrenceville. Look it up in the dictionary and you will find it described as courage and resolve, strength of character. Student life here is not easy. The highest standards are expected, and teachers will notice if you're coasting. There is no coasting when you're seated around a round table. I will never forget my first week here, which was pre-season training for field hockey. My fellow players had been at hockey camp all summer, and to me, they looked like professional athletes. Every day I would get up feeling like a bus had run me over the night before. I would wake up and return to the torture of another new culture shock, fitness training. When everyone else is doing this, the option of quitting doesn't really feel like an option at all in the end. The long days at school here, early starts, late nights, working on homework and prep alongside extracurricular activities were grueling. For the first time in my life, I was coming to terms with the reality that being tired, exhausted even, was not an acceptable excuse for not doing something or for quitting. Lawrenceville is a place of enormous privilege, but it is not a place of self-indulgence. Continuing regardless and continuing to strive for things you may not have yet succeeded at are what were asked of me here. That is where character is made. And strength of character, as the dictionary correctly states, is grit. You cannot yet imagine how much grit will be required in your futures if you hope to build careers in competitive and challenging fields. Myself and my Lawrenceville classmates went on to universities and colleges to study and prepare for our marvelous careers that would surely fall at our feet upon graduation. The only thing that fell was the world's economy, and it collapsed. We graduated in 2007, most of us, from college. Just in time for most graduate schemes to be cancelled and shut, broadcasters to lay off thousands of staff in a panic, newspapers to fold and go bust, and every door shut in my face. Grit was needed, a belief that I could make things happen for me, that I could keep moving forward and learning and adapting and innovating. I would take a job halfway across the world, correcting spelling mistakes on the sports section of a newspaper in Dubai. Grit would be needed to work late nights and weekends so I could write my own stories. Grit would be needed when I would leave that job to freelance on a shoestring budget in places like Somalia and Yemen for CNN. Grit would be needed when I would work 20-hour days fueled only by cheese triangles and Coca-Cola. And grit would be needed by the boatload when I was passed over by network after network again and again for jobs I wanted so badly. Grit is still needed on every single assignment and always will be. And you will understand this when you're attending your 15-year anniversaries here at Lawrenceville. You will look back and see the value in times here that seemed grueling, but you kept working regardless. Finally, it was the relationships I experienced here at Lawrenceville that now, in retrospect, seem like an uncanny prelude to my adult life as an international journalist. This was the first time that I interacted every day with people from different cultures and backgrounds. My roommate was from Texas, and she was a hipster who listened to good music and shopped for her clothes in trendy thrift stores. But she brought me to Red Cup parties in Austin and introduced me to breakfast burritos. There were Thai classmates who came over in connection with a Thai government-sponsored scholarship scheme. And I felt we shared a culture shock in common, despite me coming from an English-speaking Western country. Across the hall from me was a Taiwanese student I'm still in touch with. My circle of friends included a hippie surfing California girl and an ardent Republican from upstate New York. The students I shared class with came from impossible wealth and backgrounds that made my farm life in Ireland seem very privileged. Spending time with such a diversity of young people and learning to connect, bond, and make real friendships was not as easy as I thought it would be. I learned that I was actually shy and hid it behind a sense of humor. I learned that approaching other students and reaching out socially, in fact, worked. And being the new kid in a school 3,000 miles from home would force me to be more vulnerable socially than I had ever been in my life. Those skills are with me every day. The ability to reach out a hand and make a connection with someone who on the surface has little in common with me, and find the commonalities there somewhere. It's a skill needed in journalism, to like people, to get to know them, and to learn their stories. I didn't really know that I was learning these specific skills when I was here. I didn't understand completely the impact that my time at Lawrenceville was having on me and how it was going to shape my future. But that is, in fact, how life happens. As Apple founder Steve Jobs famously said, you cannot connect the dots in your life looking forward. You connect them looking back. And when I look back at my life so far, I see the dots connect back here, to this place, and I think you will too. Thanks so much for having me to speak.